Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 20 of the anime series ClassicaLoid. I really loved having Mozart coming to the fore again. He's very much kind of just been in the background, been sort of the butt of jokes for a little while now, and it was really awesome getting another episode focusing on him. It looks like the next one is actually going to be focusing on Schubert, which is awesome. Having some, alone time with the Shub, getting to know his character a little more and everything like that. But this episode had me cracking up because, of course, it's playing on the real-world Mozart's love of playing pranks and doing things that altogether could be considered lewd and lascivious. His obsession with farts and he liked pastries that were made up to look like the female anatomy, according to one story I read and everything. If you've ever sat down and watched the film Amadeus, which is talking about the real life of Mozart, you can see a lot of those things coming to the fore in this episode. A lot of the inspiration they took from the real Mozart's life, and everyone around him, all the ClassicaLoids, connived. They are on their last ever-loving nerve. They want him to stop. He's pranking them all singularly. He leads them to the backyard, to the gazebo, and he's got like a pit that they're going to fall into and everything. Pre-planned it all. And I love his little talk about, how did I come up with such a grand design, a grand plan? I can see it in my mind. And that's also something that was very much something Mozart was known for. He was composing very early in his life, as we see by the end of this episode, his Lover of 17, this rhapsody that he composed, he could actually see the musical notes and everything like that in his head. You could play a melody and he would almost like a photo recognition have it in his mind, be able to see it in his mind, and he composed a lot of his music that way. He would see it in his mind and try to work it out on paper and perfect it and things of that sort. But most of that work would be done in his mind, according to what I've heard. And so to see Moz boasting that even this prankful side of him, this gut-busting side of him, it's all about his mentality and putting it into work and thinking things out and everything like that, strategizing, if you will, being an extension of that, being able to compose and see music and everything in his mind, all that kind of stuff. I just love that. I thought it was a brilliant twist because it is arguably putting, all of that idea of his pranking people and everything, it is kind of laying it out into the extreme to a point. But this was something that the real Mozart, he liked having fun. He was a fun-loving guy, sometimes to the detriment of others around him. There were, of course, people who did not like him for his lewd, lascivious, borderline, joking and things that he would be very jovial and only a certain crowd would really get into what he was up to, that kind of thing. And so to have this entire episode really sort of fleshing him out as a ClassicaLoid was interesting because I found myself wondering in the early going of the episode, we'd already seen Beethoven had kind of had an awakening, an epiphany, episodes back where he and Mozart were on the lam and they went to that farmland and Beethoven ended up using his musique, formulating it toward the benefit of this family who was going to be suffering. They weren't going to be able to sell their crops for a year or something like that. They were going to go poor, go bankrupt, all this kind of stuff. And he didn't want them to suffer, so he used his musique for something beneficial, to grow the crops so they could actually make their money, make their earnings, and survive an entire new year. And, however many seasons actually growing up all of the crops allowed for. So we saw Beethoven really, become humanitarian, use his abilities not selfishly but selflessly. And Mozart is still, because of his childlike good humor and his wanting to prank and everything like that. I mean, we see it's really a deep down thing that he can't let go of. It's such a struggle for him not to want to push Schubert in the bath when he's giving Hashi a bath that he can't even help himself. He's like arguing with himself and he's trying to hold himself back, but in the end he can't stop himself from doing that. And it really left me begging the question, well, did Mozart really go through that journey as well? Did he really find a way to a line that he can command his music and everything like that and found a more beneficial way of using it and all this kind of stuff? And I think it's still arguable, that aspect of it. Can he use it for humanitarian and selfless purposes by the end? But we do see by the end that actually, yeah, for all of his being a prankster and for all of his getting the best of people and taking the piss out of people, as they say over in the UK, over across the pond, for all of that, I mean, he is hearkening out his musique by the end and recapturing the glory of this piece he composed at the age of 17. He's doing it on his own free will. That's where Beethoven had gotten to. That's where it seemed as though Mozart had gotten to in that episode and another couple episodes where they were, I think the plant one, they were purified, and they were then able to really call forth the music rather than on impulse and off the top of their head, which had been the case previously. They were then able to call it out by command and command it and weave it. They weren't losing control of it anymore. And it seems very much as though for all of his pranking and jokes and being very juvenile, Mozart actually had gone through that process, because he calls forth his music and he plays it and he just delights himself with it. That's where he's going away to. He's sneaking away to now that he can't sort of get his creative juices flowing by pranking everyone in Kanai's manor house. And I thought it was interesting in between all of that, when they're starting to worry about him, he's having a private conversation with Kanai's grandmother's picture, and twice he has to call out the fact that we don't know each other at all. We've never met each other in our lives. There's no way we know each other, that kind of thing. But I am having this, sort of confidential chat with you, Grandma, even though we don't know each other and everything like that. It's like, why do they keep picking up on that point? They never met. They don't know each other. Could he know her? Could he somehow met her? Maybe the ClassicaLoids have been around a lot longer than we thought. They weren't just born in, the start of the season. Maybe Mozart has been let out before and met, the grandmother. I don't know. Maybe Kanai's father has brought the grandmother back to the lab at one point or another. I don't know. It gets the speculations going crazy. But yeah, I mean, this was a mad fun episode. I was completely dying laughing when they've taken it upon themselves to follow Mozart because he's going out all the time. And they're trying to piece together what he's up to. And Schubert's coming up with all of these horrific crimes that he could be involved in. Beethoven offers, he could be the Hamagan again and molesting animals. And Schubert's like, as Sosuke's getting all pissed off, how did you come up with that? Schubert's like, what the scary thing is? All of this is plausible. It could actually be happening, knowing who Mozart is. And of course, they end up befalling all of these ill-fated, scenarios where like a can of paint drops onto their heads. Beethoven's going on about, pranks just happening out of nowhere. That's the kind of thing that happens in manga, and then all of a sudden the bridge gives out directly under him and he falls in the water saying, reality, I was dying. And then of course Kanai and Schubert, they decide to man up. They're going to be the ones who stick with following Mozart, even though all of this stuff is happening to them in the intermittent time. And then Schubert gets picked up by a kite once again. He's off to Africa again, probably. Maybe he'll end up in China this time. I don't know, but Kanai keeps going, and then it becomes almost like a Warner Brothers cartoon. Cartoons I loved since childhood. Where like pots and pans and things are just coming out of nowhere and clocking her on the head. But she ends up catching up with Mozart, who's watching this cat, who's an elementary school kid, who's, bigger for his age, and is playing basketball by himself. And there's something, you could argue, very enticing and beautiful in what Mozart is seeing, because here was a kid who has a inborn talent. And he was kind of, for whatever reason, maybe because he is so tall for his age, maybe because he has such prowess playing basketball, he found himself by himself. And Mozart kind of, is feeling like that. He's kind of feeling like the outcast. He's kind of feeling like, these people can't really appreciate my talents. And in fact, my talents are putting them off. So he's going off on his own, being sort of, a loner. And here is this kid, this basketball playing kid who he's become that. And so it's very sort of, a parallel to what Mozart is going through, and he's just absolutely captivated by this kid playing basketball by himself, because that's how Moats feels by that point. And I really felt for him, and I when when they, all of them, all the ClassicaLoids just show up out of nowhere once again. They've been following Kanai even up to that point, even though you thought they weren't. And Moats says, I'm going to go spend some time with my lover of 17. And I was like, the turn of phrase, lover of 17, I didn't for 1 minute expect it was going to be a person. I didn't know what it was going to be. I didn't know, I'm not as, fluent in the history of the real Mozart to know that he composed this particular piece he would be playing at the age of 17. But I knew it could not possibly mean a person. And what was it going to be? And of course, Schubert thinking the worst. Like, of course it's a crime. He's with an underage girl or something, But no, it's this grand musical opus that he created at such a young age. And now that he can command the musique forth on command, he can control it rather than, be at its will and at the whim of the music itself. He is in control of it. Do we see that artistic representation of him spending alone time with himself and just being with his music? Something that was a true passion to the original Mozart. And I really thoroughly loved that. It just overall, this episode once again had me laughing, but it had me feeling for Mozart. And like, I wouldn't want to be the recipient of all his pranks and everything like that, of course. It would annoy the hell out of me after a while. I'd be very much relating to the ClassicaLoids and Kanai, like, get the hell out of here with this stuff and everything. But they don't understand how true to his nature it is and how much of a hardship it is for him to overcome. But he's trying his ever-loving best because of how he feels about them. He's taking his creative pursuits elsewhere and focusing on music. And it gets the attention of Bach-sama as well, which I thought was really interesting. He pricks up his ears and he looks outside to see in the far-off distance something that he's hearing is going on. And it's like, is this playing into, once again, is the entire episode of hilarity and absurdity playing into that overarching idea of finding the 8 sounds, which I speculate to be the case. And so, yeah, just a brilliant episode. Once again, I love this series so much. And I love, they closed in on the portraits of the real composers, Beethoven and Mozart, and really, like, while he was playing his piece, you saw his hair take on the form of the hair as it reflects in the portrait and everything like that. Really giving anyone who is even remotely interested in classical music or might be, curious about it in watching a series like this, it really gives you the impetus to go and look up the history of Mozart, to become familiar with who he was, Beethoven, Schubert, Liszt, all these characters. And that's the thing I loved from the get-go about this series. And much as I had a discussion going back and forth with one of you guys in the comments, I'm really hoping we get really in-depth and find out some wondrous things about the real Schubert in the next episode, since it seems like he's going to be taking center stage, as I said at the start of the video. I am really excited for that. I'd love to learn more about each of them, respectively, before the series comes to a close, in whatever manner it's meant to do so, as much as possible, And the more the merrier. I just love it. I love that OP. As I said many times, I love playing it at least twice before the episode, and I'll play it again afterward just because I just love it. The marriage of contemporary sort of rock music to classical music, and any of the songs, that are played throughout the course of the series are usually modernized versions and contemporized versions of the classical pieces, but they give you the names, they tell you what they are, and you can go back and listen to those original recordings because most of them were actually composed hundreds of years ago. Modern artists and things of that sort have brought them to life again in their classical form, but to be able to have that added sort of experience of being able to go and learn about the real people these composers are based on, to learn about their real artistic compositions and all this kind of stuff, their performances and what they've achieved in their lives that is still lasting to this day. Hundreds of years later, it's still there's still a market for it. You know, I read a study sometime last year, 2016, that said Mozart, a compilation CD of Mozart's greatest compositions, was the top on like the record charts or something, even over Beyonce and over Jay-Z and over whatever, you know, whoever I don't even know, I'm not familiar with. That to me gave me goosebumps, and I was like, there's actually hope. There's actually hope for the world if that's the case. If Mozart, even hundreds of years later, is still topping the charts. That's frickin' dope. And so, yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of this particular episode of ClassicaLoid, episode 20, the Mozart Goes Nuts episode. And how you felt about it, if you agree with me that, you know, Mozart was such an endearing character, and in real life as well as the ClassicaLoid version, and if you felt for him that he was feeling sort of outcast and shunned, but if you could kind of relate, as I did with the ClassicaLoids, and, you know, not wanting to be pranked and everything like that, whatever your thoughts are on the episode, always love having that conversation, love it or hate it, anything goes in the comments below. And so, yeah, otherwise, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. With this video, find you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.